Joining me now to talk about all of this and more on set is Virginia Democratic Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here. You and I go way back from my time in Richmond, so I appreciate you being here. Let's talk first about the budget situation. You guys still haven't finished the 2024 appropriations package. Are you confident that the remaining bills that need to be passed will be done by March 22nd?
Well, let's say I'm hopeful. The House Republicans have found a way to turn even simple must-pass legislation into a chaotic game of brinksmanship. But I am hopeful that we do have a deal going forward and that we will pass that bill on time.
And it seems as though the Speaker doesn't want to deal with the supplemental aid package for Ukraine and Israel and others until after you clear the appropriations process. Are you optimistic about that package as well, or do you have some concerns?
I'm cautiously optimistic, but I am very concerned that with the increasing rhetoric we're hearing from the Republican Party about not wanting to stand firm with our allies in Ukraine. Today I heard they're talking about a loan program instead of direct aid. I mean, we have got to get aid to Ukraine as quickly as possible so that they can defend themselves against Putin, and hopefully we will do that.
Well, let me ask you about that idea of trying to package this, at least as a loan, as a way to bring over some of these skeptical conservative Republicans. Do you think that's practical? If a bill like that were on the table, would you at least consider it?
I would consider it. You know, the devil's always in the details, as we have seen with these bills, but I think we need to act as quickly as possible to get aid to Ukraine.
Okay, so let's talk about Speaker Mike Johnson, and you've already alluded to the fact that he has somewhat of an unruly caucus to keep in line. I want to play for you what your leader, Hakeem Jeffrey, said this weekend about Democrats potentially protecting Johnson to help get a vote on Ukraine aid. Take a listen.
Will you prevent him from being ousted?
We haven't had that conversation as a caucus, but I have made the observation that I believe there are a reasonable number of members, if the Speaker were to do the right thing, that don't believe that he should fall as a result of it.
That sounds like a yes.
So you missed the initial Kevin McCarthy drama. You've been in Congress now for a year. You were there for the second round of it. Is there any part of you, just as an individual member, not speaking broadly for the caucus, that would like to prevent seeing that sort of chaos again if a motion to vacate were brought up for Mike Johnson? Would you be a part of a group potentially that could protect him if he did the things that you were hoping in terms of Ukraine aid and appropriations process?
You know, I'm going to have to look at that moment. I think the difference is with Kevin McCarthy, he proved from day one that he was untrustworthy. And I think, you know, Speaker Johnson has proved from day one of his speakership that he can't control his caucus, but I'm not sure anybody can. And so when push comes to shove, he has put legislation on the table, and Democrats have provided the votes necessary to get it passed. And I think we will be the adults in the room and look at what we need to do to govern, and we'll see what happens.
So, but it's not something you'd rule out right out of hand. If the scenario were correct, there's a possibility that something like that could happen.
I don't rule anything out of hand. I take a look at the circumstances as they present themselves.
Okay, great. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the TikTok legislation now that you're set to vote on as soon as Wednesday. Could ban the app depending on what happens in terms of how ByteDance responds to it. The legislation calls for ByteDance to divest its interest. President Biden says that he'll sign it into law. Do you support the bill? Will you vote for it?
You know, I'm looking at it very carefully, wading through. They're two different bills. I think the one from Representative Pallone that focuses on making sure that we protect consumer information, I definitely will vote for. I'm looking at the other one. Look, I think the issue here is not TikTok per se. It's the fact that the Chinese government owns a company that is collecting very sensitive information from American citizens that it can use to create an algorithm that will provide very addictive information to provide messages and videos that could mislead the American people and manipulate our elections. And we should be very concerned about that and focus on how to keep that from happening.
Is that a broader social media question, or is it a TikTok-specific question?
This is a Chinese government situation. It is the fact that the Chinese government owns a company that is collecting this data, and that we need to make sure that we protect the private, sensitive information of American citizens.
I mean, the Biden campaign is using TikTok right now. Some of your Democratic colleagues use TikTok on a regular basis to reach their constituents. Do you think that's hypocritical at all, or do you think there's a way to use it in a safe manner?
Well, they don't use it on their private phones. They don't use it on their government phones. I think, and that's part of what we need to look at, is what information is TikTok gathering? And I think when the president's campaign or some of my colleagues use it, I don't use it, but when they use it, I think they're very careful what they have on that phone other than TikTok, so that the information gathered is not as sensitive. The average user of TikTok doesn't do that. You know, most of my friends, I kind of look at them and say, do you really want the Chinese government getting access to everything on your phone? Because they are. And then they kind of pause. So that's the real issue.
Yeah. Let's turn to the campaign trail now. President Biden in New Hampshire today is going to go to Wisconsin and Michigan later. A very busy campaign schedule. Do you think that the combination of him getting out on the road, his strong speech on Thursday, do you think that's going to help to quell some of these concerns about his age and fitness for office? I
do. Look, I saw, being in the room for the State of the Union, what I saw was a man who is feisty and ready to lead, and from day one has led. He inherited a country that was in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a financial crisis, and he got things done regardless of his age. He will continue to get things done and fight for the American people, while the former president fights for himself.
Yeah, let's talk now a little bit about your first year in office. I mean, you're a veteran legislator. I don't mean that because you're still very young, but you were in the House of Delegates, you were in the state Senate in Virginia. Now you're here in Congress. I mean, just reflect on that first year. Has it been frustrating? Is it hopeful? I mean, is this what you envisioned when you took the job?
Yes and no. I mean, all of the above. You know, the joke I use is it feels like I graduated high school and went to college, although there are some days, you know, in the middle of the speaker fight, I wondered if I regressed to middle school.
Right.
But it's, you know, it's the honor of a lifetime to be able to not only help people, but to do so making history as the first Black woman elected to Congress from Virginia. And even despite the Republican chaos, I've been able to get things done. Just last week, getting $15 million in community project funding, you know, to help with the Richmond combined sewage overflow system, and the survivors of domestic violence. I've been able to get provisions in the NDAA to help with mental health services for our service members. So, and then you get nights like the State of the Union that are pretty exciting.
Yeah. Well, you and I go way back. It's like we picked right up where we left off. So, Congresswoman McClellan, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.